The Ndrangheta. While most people know about the Sicilian Mafia, the real power in Italy belongs to a group most have never heard of. The Ndrangheta. Based in Calabria, Italy's poorest region, they've built what may be the world's most profitable criminal enterprise. Italian investigators estimate they generate over $60 billion annually. That's more revenue than McDonald's and Deutsche Bank combined. And they control approximately 80% of Europe's cocaine trade, moving thousands of tons of drugs through a network that spans 5 continents. Their global reach is extraordinary, as their operatives have been arrested in Colombia, Ecuador, Germany, Belgium, and Australia. They don't just import cocaine, they've created the entire infrastructure for moving it from South American coca fields to European nightclubs. They control ports, shipping companies, and distribution networks across multiple continents. Their business model is remarkably sophisticated. They don't just sell drugs, they provide logistics services to other criminal organizations. Want to move money through Europe? They have the network. Need to smuggle weapons into Africa? They have the connections. They've become the Amazon of organized crime, providing infrastructure for criminal enterprises worldwide. The Italian port of Gioia Tauro, in the heart of Ndrangheta territory, processes over 3.6 million containers annually. It's virtually impossible to inspect them all, making it the perfect gateway for cocaine entering Europe. In 2021 alone, authorities seized 13 tons of cocaine at the port, and that's estimated to be only a fraction of what actually passes through. The Genovese family, when people think of the American Mafia, they picture Al Capone or scenes from The Godfather. But the real power has always belonged to the Genovese family, the organization that law enforcement calls the Ivy League of organized crime. Founded in the early 1900s by Giuseppe Morello and later transformed by Lucky Luciano, the Genovese family perfected something that eluded most criminal organizations: invisibility. While other families made headlines with spectacular violence, the Genovese quietly infiltrated the legitimate economy. They didn't just run illegal gambling, they controlled labor unions that built New York's skyscrapers. The family's genius wasn't in being the most violent, but in being the most sophisticated. They pioneered stock market manipulation schemes decades before they became trendy on Wall Street. Through their control of construction unions, they literally built Manhattan while taking a cut of every project. Their influence reached so deep into legitimate business that for decades you couldn't build a building, move cargo through the ports, or operate a restaurant in certain neighborhoods without paying tribute. Vincent "the Chin" Gigante, who ran the family for nearly 2 decades, famously wandered around Greenwich Village in a bathrobe, pretending to be mentally ill to avoid prosecution. It worked for years. While he acted crazy on the streets, he was running a criminal empire that federal investigators estimated generated hundreds of millions annually. What made the Genovese different was their patience. Other families chased quick scores. The Genovese built institutions. They created systems that could generate money for generations. Even today, despite decades of prosecutions, the family continues to operate. Recent indictments show they've adapted to the modern economy, moving into construction fraud, illegal gambling operations, and sophisticated financial crimes. The family's influence extended far beyond crime. They had judges on payroll, politicians in their pocket, and business leaders who couldn't operate without their permission. They didn't just break the law, they operated parallel to it, creating their own system of justice and commerce that existed alongside the legitimate world. The Yamaguchi Gumi. Japan's Yamaguchi Gumi operates like a Fortune 500 company that happens to be completely illegal. With over 20,000 members organized into dozens of subsidiary groups, it's structured more like a multinational corporation than a traditional crime family. Founded in 1915 by a dock worker named Harukichi Yamaguchi, the organization grew under the leadership of Kazuo Tauka, who transformed it from a local gang into Japan's dominant criminal force. What sets the Yamaguchi Gumi apart is their corporate approach to crime. They have business cards, official headquarters, and a complex organizational chart that would impress any MBA. The group's revenue streams read like a diversified investment portfolio. They control construction companies, finance operations, gambling enterprises, and legitimate businesses across Asia. Their construction companies have built some of Japan's most famous buildings. Their finance arms loan money to businesses that can't get traditional bank loans. They essentially operate a shadow economy that parallels Japan's legitimate business world. What's remarkable about the Yamaguchi Gumi is their relationship with Japanese society. Unlike criminal organizations in other countries that operate in complete opposition to the state, the Yakuza exist in a gray area. Their membership isn't technically illegal, and their headquarters are clearly marked. They're like a parallel government that provides services the official government can't or won't provide. Recent years have seen the Yamaguchi Gumi face internal challenges. A major split in 2015 created rival factions that have been engaged in a decade-long conflict, but Even weakened by internal warfare, the organization remains Japan's dominant criminal force and one of the world's largest organized crime groups. The Sinaloa Cartel. Under Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's leadership, these guys built a distribution network that moved products from Colombian coca fields to American street corners with unprecedented efficiency. The cartel's innovation wasn't just in brutality, it was in logistics. They built tunnels under the US-Mexico border that were equipped with lighting, ventilation, and rail systems. They used submarines to move cocaine from South America to Mexico. They developed drones for surveillance and delivery long before these technologies became mainstream. Their distribution network spanned 5 continents. Sinaloa operatives have been arrested in Europe, Asia, Africa, and Australia. They didn't just export to these markets, they established local distribution networks that could operate independently. Like a legitimate multinational corporation, they created regional franchises that could adapt to local conditions while maintaining central coordination. The cartel's revenue was estimated at over $3 billion annually at its peak, more than many legitimate corporations. But unlike legal businesses, their profit margins were extraordinary. A kilogram of cocaine that cost $1,000 to produce in Colombia could be sold for $30,000 on American streets. The markup was so enormous that they could afford to lose shipments to law enforcement and still maintain profitability. What made the Sinaloa cartel particularly dangerous was their corruption capabilities. They didn't just bribe local police, they corrupted entire government institutions. Mexican investigators found evidence that the cartel had penetrated the highest levels of law enforcement, military, and political institutions. They essentially created a parallel state within Mexico that served their interests. Their operational security was also sophisticated. They used encrypted communications, constantly changed their methods, and compartmentalized operations so that no single arrest could bring down the entire network. Even after El Chapo's capture and imprisonment, the organization continued operating under new leadership. The Cali cartel, led by brothers Gilberto and Miguel Rodriguez Orejuela, Cali ran cocaine trafficking like a Fortune 500 company. Instead of violence, Cali favored bribery and diplomacy. They infiltrated Colombia's political system, placing informants at the highest levels. They owned legitimate businesses, banks, pharmacies, football clubs, and funneled billions in drug profits through these fronts. At their peak in the 1990s, they represented the most sophisticated criminal organization in history, generating an estimated $7 billion annually. The Rodriguez Orejuelas brothers accumulated personal fortunes that DEA investigators estimated exceeded $250 billion in worldwide assets, making them among the wealthiest criminals ever. In 1994 alone, investigators estimated they generated $5 billion in revenue from U.S. operations while controlling 80% of the world's cocaine market. Their forfeiture to U.S. authorities, $2.1 billion, represented only a fraction of their accumulated wealth and demonstrated the scale of their financial empire. What ultimately destroyed the Cali cartel wasn't law enforcement, it was their success. They became so large and so visible that they could no longer operate in the shadows. But their model influenced criminal organizations worldwide, proving that sophisticated management could be more effective than violence. The Medellin cartel. And finally, the most notorious, the Medellin cartel led by Pablo Escobar, the richest criminal in history. In the late 70s and early 80s, Escobar transformed cocaine trafficking from a street-level operation into a global, multi-billion-dollar industry. The cartel he founded in Medellin, Colombia practically owned the cocaine market. At its peak, the Medellin cartel supplied over 80% of the world's cocaine, flooding North America and Europe with tons of the drug every week. Escobar's cartel was pulling in roughly $420 million per week. That's nearly $22 billion a year. The money came in so fast they couldn't even launder it properly. Instead, they buried cash in fields, hid it behind walls, or simply left it piled in warehouses. It's said that Escobar had to write off nearly $2 billion every year just because rats would eat through stacks of cash stored in warehouses. Unlike Cali, Medellin was built on violence, terror, and intimidation. Escobar assassinated politicians, judges, journalists, anyone who opposed him. At one point, he declared war on the Colombian state, bombing airplanes and police stations. Yet, he also became a hero to the poor, building homes and hospitals, ensuring locals protected him. Escobar's downfall came in 1993, hunted down by a coalition of Colombian forces and U.S. intelligence. His death ended an era. But the Medellin cartel had changed the world forever. It set the blueprint for modern drug cartels, ruthless violence, bribery networks reaching deep into politics, and the ability to make billions of dollars from drugs at a global scale. Did you enjoy this breakdown? Then please subscribe and hit that bell for more.